Welcome back to Whence, a free Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. I'm your host, Brother Robert Johnson. This is episode 133. This is it. This week I have a great interview with Brother Juan Sepulveda, who is the writer, producer, and host of the Masonic podcast, The Winding Stairs. This interview is a long one. In fact, it ran about an hour, but I know you guys will enjoy it. So I am cutting the famous Freemason segment, and there will be no paper either for this week. I want to just say, please check out the support the show links to help us out. All the information is there, and please support your Grand Lodge charities. Check out the Valley of Chicago Scottish Rite website for details on how you can help out with the upcoming Dyslexia Walk. Check out the Midnight Freemasons as well, www.midnightfreemason.blogspot.com. I hope you all are enjoying the Masonic Roundtable live YouTube show. If you're new to it or you haven't heard of it, please check out www.youtube.com/Masonic Roundtable. All right, let's dig into the interview. Remember, I said the interview quality was going to be great when I bought a new mixer, and I have to say, get ready because it is amazing. So here we go, the interview with Brother Juan Sepulveda. All right, everybody. Today we're talking with Brother Juan Sepulveda, podcaster, fine artist, dad, husband, and most importantly, Freemason. So, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on your program.
Oh, man, you know how much of a pleasure it is. I shouldn't say most importantly Freemason. Most importantly, we all know, dad and husband. So, let me correct that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, a lot of people out there know you from your successful podcast, The Winding Stairs. But what a lot of people might not know is that you are the brother behind Masonic Fundraiser. The Masonic Fundraiser was actually the first thing that I saw you in any form on the internet. And if people don't know, Masonic Fundraiser, you would buy a print, really nice, fine Masonic print, and a portion of the sale went back to your Grand Lodge for the charities or whatever the cause was. And then shortly after that, we had freemasonryart.com, and both are totally amazing. So if you guys didn't know, Brother Juan Sepulveda is the guy behind those. But before we dive in, can you give everyone a kind of background on your Masonic career, why you became a Freemason, what got you started in art, all those kind of things?
Excellent. My story is a long one, but I know we're limited on time, and you personally know I can talk forever. But when I first learned about Freemasonry, and it was in a crossroads in my life, because I had heard that an uncle of mine was a Mason, but I was so young that I really had no idea what it meant. I had no idea what that meant. What I knew is that I really liked him. I liked how he behaved himself. I really liked how inspirational he was to me and to the other members of the family, how determined he was, hardworking. So those were a lot of the things that I liked about him, and I had heard in passing that he was a Freemason, but I really had no clue what that meant until my grandmother passed away. When my grandmother passed away and we were in the cemetery giving our last words and everything, a man went to the front of the crowd and started speaking about my grandmother and how much he loved her and admired her, and how much he loved and admired my uncle. So he started speaking about my uncle in such a proud way, and then he said, many of you know, he said his name, has been a master of our lodge, and he said the name of the lodge. I really can't remember what it was, but he's a Freemason, and he has been a great leader in our community and Freemasonry. And that blew my mind. I'm like, what is this man talking about? What is this Freemasonry thing?
Right.
Now this is the second time I hear about it. So that's when I first remember thinking, I really want to know more about this.
Well, I had a similar experience. Mine ended up not being true. I developed an interest in Masonry, but I always thought my dad may have been a Freemason, and I never really got to talk to my biological father very much. And so eventually I asked my mom, I said, so was he a Freemason? And she said, I don't know. And when I actually did find out was that he wasn't a Freemason, he was literally a brick mason. And he belonged to a union lodge, and by that time I had already joined a lodge. So I kind of joined in preemptive. I guess you could say. But that's amazing. The story you tell is kind of similar in kind of an odd way to Chris Hodap. He talks about how he joined because his father-in-law passed away, and he was so moved in the ceremony and what they did to get the ceremony done on time, he had to be a part of it.
Yeah, and those are moments where you really stop and think. Those are those moments where you're coming together with people you haven't seen in a long time, and that's the moment where you start thinking back at the time that you had with the person that's gone. So you're in a very receptive state. So you're really paying attention to all these things and really, when people say good words about the person that passed away, and in this case, they were talking about her son and saying such amazing things, to me, that was an indication that whatever he was doing was contributing to the excellent man that he was, and I wanted to learn more about it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But the difference in the generations of Freemasons, and in Puerto Rico, it's a little bit more reserved. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and in Puerto Rico, Freemasonry is a little bit more discreet than here in the United States.
Sure, it's probably more like it used to be in the States.
Yes. And that meant that the moment that I decided to approach my uncle, and I remember I sat with him on his in his kitchen. We were sitting on a stool, and I asked him, what is this Freemasonry thing that you are in? I want to know a little bit more. And his response was very protected. And that caused a lot of confusion in me, because I couldn't really decipher if his reservation was because he didn't really want to speak about it at the moment, or if he really wanted to speak in a different setting.
Right.
I really couldn't read it. So there was a part of me that felt, well, maybe I can't be part of it.
Sure.
Maybe he knows something, and maybe he doesn't think I'm worthy of doing it. It's one of those doubts that was in my mind. So I only brought it up, I think, one more time, and his answer was very similar. He said, well, let's sit down, come over. That time I called him on the phone, and I was living in the States already, and I called him up and I told him, I'm really interested in learning a little bit more about it. And he said, well, when you come over, we'll sit down and talk. And I took it that time too as almost a dismissal. It's like, no, yeah, we'll talk.
Right,
right. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to press the matter. So I've never spoken with him since about Freemasonry.
Really? That's wild. I would think that maybe you went out there, you talked to him, and he, said, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. I'll sign your petition, and then you joined. But you never talked to him again, huh?
No, I know that he is aware that I am a Freemason because my father and my brother joined Freemasonry after I did, and I know that my brother has spoken with him about it, and I wanted to do it in person. So This is something that still hasn't happened. I still haven't.
Is he in the States?
No, he's in Puerto Rico.
Okay, so you got to plan a little visit, buddy.
Oh, you definitely.
Time for a little vacation.
Yeah.
Well, cool,
and
man.
We'll talk freely then.
So when you became a Freemason, did you have any kind of... I know a lot of guys who join, initially they go through the degrees, or maybe they have a little bit of stall time. It'll be 6 months to a year before a degree sometimes because they're not exactly sure, or they don't have the time to do it. Some guys go through, in 3 months or sooner. But I guess my question is, when you joined and you finally became a Master Mason, did you find that it was what you were looking for? Or did you find some initial, not disappointment, but some initial, another word for disappointment, but not quite disappointment?
No, I completely understand what you're asking, because coincidentally, that's one of the things that I am writing about, and shortly I'm going to start sharing with the brothers a little bit more about it. And it's that discrepancy of expectations. Is that expectation gap of what I really thought Freemasonry was and what it ended not what it ended up being, but how the experience that my experience in it ended up being.
Gotcha.
And I want to give you a funny story about. It's a very good illustration, in my opinion, of that discrepancy in expectations. Whatever little I had learned about Freemasonry, because I was cautious not to spoil anything, and I'm very savvy at looking in the internet and finding things. If I have questions, I find answers on the internet. And I was very cautious not to find anything that was going to spoil the fun
I
for
did the
me.
same thing.
Yeah? For the brothers that are new to Freemasonry or people that are listening to the program that haven't yet petitioned, do yourself a favor. Don't go prying everywhere trying to find all these answers. It's so much better when you really know little, and it's really a life-changing experience when you go through it.
Oh yeah, it's like finding the Christmas presents before it's Christmas time.
Yeah.
It's a bummer. I had a buddy of mine. His name is Yukitaro Humada, and he's this Japanese fellow that I used to work with, and he's so awesome. And he's the one who turned me on to Masonry. He's not even a Mason, but he had spent some time. He's very kind of a new age, a very clean living, awesome, like spiritual person. And he had this book, and it was Masonry Illustrated, and it was nothing but old tapestries of Masonic stuff and just short descriptions of what it was supposed to be. And I kind of had some clues to what was going to happen in my degrees when I saw these pictures, but I said, well, these pictures are so old, it's probably not the same. But it was the same, and if I had known that at the time, I would have ruined it for myself. And
yeah, yeah, it's better. It's the way I describe that. Like, I as an artist, I really understand that a story can be told in many different ways through different mediums. And, often you hear people say, oh my God, the book was so much better than the movie.
right.
And yeah, it's a different format. It's a different experience. If you make peace with the fact that it's a different medium that you're going to experience, then you can really enjoy all the little nuances of that medium, So enjoy it for what it is, So I don't want to know if the movie was great and the book was better. No, just give me a little summary of what the movie is about, enough to get me interested. Okay, I don't want to know anymore. Let me go in with a completely clear mind so that I can completely enjoy every little aspect of it and then come up with my own judgment.
Absolutely.
So, going back to the illustration of the disparity of expectation, when I petitioned here in Florida, I submitted my petition. I expected the process to be a lot faster than it was, and I made the mistake of petitioning towards the closing of the Masonic year.
Right.
So there was elections and a lot of dinners. There was a lot going on, but I had no clue. So all this is happening, and meanwhile I'm waiting for a phone call. I'm waiting for something to happen, and I had contact with the secretary of the lodge, and in my mind I expected something grand to happen when I found out if I was accepted or not.
Right.
And I like to joke about it. I exaggerate a little bit, but I envisioned that I would be walking in the mall and I would notice some guy in a black jacket with shades kind of looking at me from a distance, and all of a sudden someone hits my shoulder, and when I look, they put in my hands a parchment sealed envelope, and inside was the notice. But sadly enough, I got a tweet. Talk about disappointment. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, no.
Well, at least you got a tweet, man. When my lodge has been very, very proactive and it's been very progressive with new ideas all the time. When somebody brings it up, when nobody does anything about it, like most things, if you're not going to make any progressive steps, then nothing's going to happen. Things remain the same. But at least my guys, they kind of have taken that digital leap. But mine was just a phone call. Mine was Yeah, yeah, you've been elected to receive the degrees. And
Hmm.
I was excited. I got the phone call, you know, my wife was like, "Congratulations, yay." And of course, you
But
know,
it wasn't a horseman galloping to you with a
yeah,
with a
yeah, the horse didn't pull up at the stroke of midnight, hand me my parchment, whisked me away in the middle of the night to receive the mysteries, and shortly thereafter I received the coordinates on the right place to dig on Oak Island for the Masonic treasure.
exactly. But you know what? I've always been very very strong about this opinion that you cannot come to the table complaining unless you bring at least one solution for that problem.
Right.
So when I when I joined the lodge and I got accepted, so of course I was grateful that I was accepted to receive the degrees, but a little bit more tact could have been used. And it really doesn't cost a lot to create a great impression on the person that applied.
Right.
So when I joined, I became very active, and shortly thereafter, I became one of the officers in the lodge. So I would speak with the secretary and the worshipful master elect, and I said, let's do something special when this person receives an approval, the craft votes to accept them into Freemasonry. Let's do something nice for them. It really doesn't cost us anything to get a nice letterhead that's not crooked, that the ink is not fading, and that they can save it and frame it and be very proud of it.
The second you started saying it, I started envisioning exactly what you're talking about, and I thought to myself, why don't we do that? So
Exactly.
guess
And
what?
it really doesn't cost much. And Brother Jody Fails from Yola Lodge, if he's listening, hello from your brother Juan over here. He listened to me, and he actually ordered a custom made seal, like embossing seal for wax seals.
Yeah,
And in his year in the East, the invitations to the dinners for the widows and for the past masters, they were sealed
that's
with
awesome.
the square and compasses and the name of the lodge, and it really didn't cost much. But the impression that it cost on people that received that invitation,
It's
it was
huge.
priceless.
It's huge. Yeah. Now you got me thinking. Like immediately, you know, I've got to meet. We meet every Monday, so immediately I'm going to tell the master and also my junior warden, hey, we are buying some parchment paper. We are going to, when people get voted on and they're going to receive degrees, we're mailing this or we'll hand
Yeah.
deliver it.
Yeah.
That'll be nice.
I think that is so powerful, and it kind of sets the tone. Of course, you have to follow up and try to make all try to continue to improve on the experiences. So, like for example, I've seen where in the preparation room, jokes are exchanged and
Oh
people are in
yeah.
a very lively mood, and the preparation room should be in a solemn state.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
but we can talk about that forever.
Kind of moving on a little bit, I wanted to kind of ask you about there's a lot of people out there who say they're artists, right? And they are artists to a sense. I know very few real artists, right? My buddy Yuki Hamada, the Japanese fellow I mentioned, he's an artist. I know my buddy Freddie Torres, who lives down there in Florida. He works for Universal. He's an artist. I know you were an artist.
Like,
What got you started in artwork? Have you always been involved in art?
as long as I can remember, I have. My mother was an artist, and I grew up seeing that she would create something out of nothing. And that to me always was very miraculous. She could find any kind of scraps of fabric and a little bit of glue and a couple of things here and there. And she would come up with a brand new decoration for the table so that we could have something nice on Thanksgiving.
Sure. That's
That to me
awesome.
was very powerful, and I emulated her. I would, whenever I saw something that I liked, I didn't always think, oh, I want to buy that. Usually the first thought is like, how can I make something like that?
I do
Right.
that too.
So that's the environment in which I grew. So seeing that creativity kind of got me started. and I've been drawing as long as I can remember. Painting, I can tell you, I started my first painting in 1998.
All right. Now, at that point, were you a Mason already or no?
No, no,
Okay.
I've, what, 98, 11 years later, I became a Mason.
Okay. So you're kind of like me, like in mid 2000s, you became a full blown Freemason.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool, man. If you guys haven't seen Juan's art, so much of it involves the craft, but it's not blatantly apparent in the artwork itself. I mean, unless he has a whole series where it's got symbolism all over. It's got square and compasses, the Book of Constitutions, or whatever you want to call the Holy Book. But he has another set that isn't exactly Masonic, like immediately right off the bat. A Mason sees it and can see it right away. But somebody who might not be engaged in that thought process like a Freemason kind of always is, it's like once we become a Mason, right, they flip a switch and all of a sudden we see the symbols everywhere, even when they're really not there.
Yes, yes. Everyone's a Mason. Anyone amazing is a Mason.
That's true.
In our eyes.
We will work tirelessly to prove they were a Mason, even if they
Yes.
were a anti-Mason.
Yes.
But the artwork
Yeah,
is
John
fantastic.
Quincy was not. I've checked several times. He was not a Mason.
We had, I was looking at some of your artwork the other day, and the thing that always strikes me about the artwork that you've done, that, not talking about the prints that have all the symbols on them that we know, but your other ones that are a little less, they're a little more ambiguous. The colors and stuff that you use are just, they're like so bright, and they really complement the entire piece. So I just want to let you know that those are awesome, man. I love
Thank
those.
you. Thank you very much. And those resemble my mainstream work. I was a professional artist before I became a Mason.
Right.
I have been making a living as an artist since 2004, and my style, I call it inspirational symbolism, and that's part of the coincidence, if you want to call it, of me becoming a Mason. For years before becoming a Mason, I called my style inspirational symbolism because my goal was to, through my paintings and my drawings, share lessons of my life and the life of people around me just using symbols. So you would look at a painting that would have perhaps a man that is in a hallway with doors on both sides, and he is on the floor defeated. Well, many people will look at it and find different interpretations. Some people would say, oh, well, he has given up, and other people would say he was thrown out of somewhere. But my story is that he has opportunities, that even though one door is not opening to you, there's other doors. All you need to do is muster the strength and stand up, turn around, and there's going to be another door. And out of 10, maybe only one opens, but it's your duty to actually go and knock on 9 before you actually get a yes.
Right, right.
So having almost little lessons on very simple or ambiguous paintings was part of me before I became a Mason. And it really lent itself for Masonic paintings because our craft is illustrated by symbols. So it was perfect.
Well, you were talking about your style before a few minutes ago, and I wanted to interrupt you, but I didn't want to interrupt your thought. And I got to say, your style is your style. I'm not a huge connoisseur of art. In fact, up until, I don't know, 6 years ago, I would only display art in my house that I knew personally the person who made it.
Nice.
It had a meaning to me that way, and it still pretty much is that way. In fact, the only piece of art in my home that isn't by somebody I know is I have a print of Disney's House of Tomorrow. It's my favorite print, and I had it, printed on their inkjet at Disneyland when we lived out in Southern California, and I had it just rolled up, and it was in a poster frame, and my wife eventually took it, and she had it all framed up, and with the dust-proof glass and all this stuff, and it's the only print in my home that isn't by somebody I know. The style is your own. I'm not a connoisseur of art, like I said. It's So I don't know everybody, but I know quite a bit of people, and I know quite a bit of styles, and it's individual, it's unique, it's colorful, and it really draws your eye to look at it, and not just look at it in passing, to look at it for almost a few minutes, because like you said, you've got this symbolism there, and there's a story behind it, and it's like your brain almost picks up on these things.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, I see art is almost like it's like a conversation. I like the idea of the challenge that some of my work presents, because I show you something and it could be interpreted in many different ways, but to me it opens the door for a conversation. So when you have a painting on the wall and it could be interpreted in different ways, when people come to the house and they look at it, they can come with their own conclusions.
Sure.
And during the exhibitions, I've been making art shows for many years. I've come across a lot of different types of people. Like you, for example, you have paintings and art of people that you know, and other people have only photographs of their family, or some people might have just posters, or some people have nothing on their walls. And oftentimes it might be as a result of fear of not knowing enough. And people should be comfortable that if they see something and they like it, and perhaps they learn a little bit more about what the painting is about, learn a little bit more about the person that made it, then it's okay for them to have that in their wall. Even they don't need to be experts in art to collect it.
Sure. Yeah, it's the pieces go well with pretty much anything also, because of I keep going back to the colors, because the colors is the first thing that strikes me about your piece. The greens that you use and the reds, they pop really well, and they pretty much go with anything. But more specifically, I mean, you will enjoy the prints anyway, but they are very nice.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you also to kind of go from your artwork and Masonic fundraiser. This is a program where people would buy the art, and then you'd submit a portion of the proceeds to the Grand Lodge?
Well, the concept has changed from its inception. When I first began, that was the idea. The idea was that when people would buy art, they tell me what lodge they were in or what Grand Lodge, and I would take a portion of that and send it to them. But I came across a lot of unforeseen challenges.
Sure.
For example, some people didn't want to say who to what lodge they belonged, so they opted for not buying anything, just because they didn't. I don't know if they wanted to be more secretive about it or what, but they would opt not to buy anything.
Okay.
In summary, a lot of different things happened that it didn't make it very feasible. Yeah. So the way that Masonic Fundraiser works today, and it's proven to be a very effective way for lodges to raise funds and for it to be set up, is that when your lodge, if they have a project that they want to raise funds for, or just to supplement the income coming into the lodge, all they need to do is fill out the form that they can find in thewindingstairs.com / Masonic Fundraiser, or they can go to masonicfundraiser.com to make it easier. They fill out the form there, and I set up a promotional code. So what the lodge does is that they encourage their brothers to visit the website if they like anything there, and oftentimes it's things that they're going to buy anyway.
Right.
So they're going to buy Masonic art, or they're going to buy aprons for themselves or as gifts for the past masters. So they encourage them to visit the website and make purchases and use the promotional code. That's how I know what lodge they belong to,
Right.
and a portion of the purchase goes directly to that lodge.
That's very cool. That's very cool. I was going to mention the same thing. Like, are you still doing it the same way? Because I was foreseeing some of those difficulties myself, but not as much as what you were experiencing. On my end, I would have been going nuts trying to write, checks or make, transactions, trying to get them to these Grand
Yes.
Lodges, because
That's another problem that I faced.
The
Because
administrative.
for every order that came in, I would have to write a check. Whereas if now your lodge has a promotional code, the agreement is that at the end of the month, I sit down and I process all the different orders for the that belong to that particular lodge.
Right.
So now instead of sitting down every day to write a different check, I'm sitting once a month, and that's the check writing day, and I send it out.
That's much,
And
much better, I'm sure.
definitely, definitely, because it ended up being the problems compounded because then I of course my main concern is that I didn't want for the lodge that was receiving the check. Let's say, for example, the brother purchased the order, purchased an art, and I shipped it out, and it took me a long time to send the check. I didn't want to give a wrong impression that I was just keeping the money and saying that I'm going to send a check and not send it.
Right.
And I'd rather the lodge know what's happening beforehand. That way there's no confusion.
Absolutely. So,
I wanted to also clarify the way that Masonic Fundraiser began was that I made these paintings for myself.
gotcha.
I made these paintings because I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could have one painting that has symbols of every step of my progress? And every time that I look at them, I'm reminded of the working tools of the entered apprentice. And I have them. Of course, I still own the originals, and I have them here in my home. When I see them, I see those symbols. And there's an incredible power in symbols. That's why every religion that you can think of has symbols that pertain to those particular religions, because one symbol can tell you so much in a fraction of a second.
Oh, yeah.
And
There's,
you're able, yeah.
I was going to say, there's emblem books, from turn of the century and before. The idea behind the symbol and the emblems is that in an age, well, twofold. In an age when people were illiterate, the emblems would provide them the knowledge that they could use. The second is the fact that the emblem conveys so much more than just a word.
Exactly.
It's literally infinite, more than paragraphs, more than books.
And it's customized for every individual. You can
Right.
look at the square and compasses, and even though we have a standard definition of what it means, when a brother sees it, he has his own interpretation of it based on his experience with it.
Right.
So that's the power of the symbols, and that's what I really wanted. I wanted to create these pieces that I could look at, and I would be motivated whenever I saw them, or if I'm having a horrible day and I'm kind of in a quarrel with someone, I'm able to see one of the symbols and think, okay, I need to keep my passions under control, and I start trying to apply those lessons that I learned, as opposed to just keeping everything hidden. I wanted it displayed where I could see it and be reminded of those lessons. So that's how it began. And we were sitting down in a finance committee meeting at my lodge, and I brought it up. I told them I made this collection of art. Perhaps we can do something with it so that we can raise funds. And I said, I'm willing to make prints of them, and I'll give a portion of it to the lodge. And we had that was one of the most successful programs that we had that year. And it was put together almost haphazardly.
Right.
It's just like, oh, we should do this. Oh, done. And one night I presented. Actually, I didn't present it. I sent in a check with a letter to the secretary. To my surprise, he read it. He as correspondence. It was a little embarrassing to me, but
Yeah, they'll do that. Your secretaries, quite obviously proud of you and thankful for what you did. So they're gonna put you on the spot.
yeah, they sure did. But it was, the point is that it was successful, and then brothers started sharing the images with other brothers, and people started asking, oh, do you still have those prints? Do you have prints? And people started asking for them, and I thought, well, maybe if I put them online, I can still continue to help my lodge. So one thing led to another, and I thought, well, perhaps other lodges could use the image and they could raise funds for their lodges. So instead of just leaving it up to them, I took the initiative and I made all the infrastructure for it so that the lodges could have their own fundraiser program set up as easy as possible,
Right.
and with no investment up front. So that was important to me.
Yeah, it's an incredible, generous thing that you've done, and I think it's just amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I was going to kind of tell you a little bit my favorite thing that you offer on freemasonryart.com. And I don't know if it was kind of one of the flagship ideas that you had or not, but when you first came out with the aprons, if you guys don't know, Juan came out with real lambskin aprons that are crafted. They show signs of imperfectness. They're not these, when you go to J.P. Luther Company or one of these other Masonic supply companies, you get really nice aprons. It's no secret. You can get a really great looking apron.
Mm-hmm.
But these aprons, they are the traditional lambskin white aprons, and they're rounded. The cords are exquisite. I mean, the craftsmanship behind these things is amazing. And my favorite thing was, well, kind of twofold, actually. My favorite thing was when you started offering to do a design on the apron itself. And the second one was when you decided to do the trim on the apron with the black. Together is my favorite thing in the world.
Thank you very much.
They're so awesome. And if you guys listen, shameless plug right now, you can go to freemasonryart.com and buy one of these aprons. If you use WCY as your coupon code, you're going to get 10% off. And Juan sends a little bit of love to the show. You guys get, I want to say no BS here, guys, but it's PG. These aprons are amazing. They're great aprons. And where did you come up with the idea to do aprons?
Well, if you think about the connection between the arts and Freemasonry, if you were to look at old books, and even if you were to search for Masonic art online, you will see that a lot of it is on old aprons. It struck me as odd that when I then set foot in a lodge, they were all white.
Right.
And the only ones that had any kind of adornment were the officers, and even then, it was all machine made. To me, that was very odd because, going back to that disparity of expectations, I thought, oh my God, I could only imagine the aprons that I'm going to see inside the lodge.
Right.
And it really surprised me that when you look at old Masonic aprons whenever you do a search online, they were painted.
Yeah, if you go to the George Washington Masonic Memorial, and I think it's on the 3rd floor, there's a floor that the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction funded, and all the aprons that are on display are all hand painted.
Mm-hmm.
And they're cracked with age, and they've definitely seen some better days, but they're painted. The blues are still blue, the reds are still red. They're awesome.
Oh yeah, and depending on the medium that they would use, for example, right now I'm working on one of the aprons, and I'm using authentic oil paints in the apron, and the pigments that I'm using is the same exact material that I'm using in my fine art. So a painting that could be passed from generation to generation, from a collector to another, and it could last for hundreds of years. That's the same quality of material that I'm using in the apron. Because ideally, the brother, if he chooses to have his white lambskin that's provided to him by his lodge, that one goes with him to the Celestial Lodge. But then they can buy one that they travel with, and they can leave as a family heirloom. So I wanted that to be the quality, to be something that a son would be blown away to have it in their possession, whether they were Masons or not, for them to be proud of having it and seeing it and sharing it with people.
Definitely. So, I spoke a while ago and I thought my dad was a Mason and he wasn't. But my wife's family, her father was not a Mason, as typical. For some reason, our dads weren't Masons. A lot of guys I know. But his dad was a Mason and his dad was a Mason, and all the way back, right? So I've got a lot of their stuff, and I was given the apron, their grandfather.
Oh my.
And so I keep that, and I keep meaning to have it framed or something. But, it's one of those things, when you get past something like that, that's special, it really means a lot. And I can only imagine to be able to be handed an apron of the quality that you guys are producing. I shouldn't say you guys, that you are producing, that come along. And if somebody handed me that, like, oh, this was your great-granddad's, and, it's this amazing apron with the artwork on it and the oil paints, it would be fantastic.
You imagine. That would be really cool.
It would be insane.
Well, going back to, what I said earlier about whenever I see something, I don't necessarily think, oh, how can I buy one of those? I think, how can I make that?
Right.
So that's how I started with the creating the aprons. I had looked at all these ancient aprons, and I've seen some of the paintings that are on them. Some are amazing, but other of the paintings on the aprons, they were less refined. They were clearly done by either the person that wore them or a family member who had some talent. So, but the symbols in them, they were clear, and I thought, wow, all of these other artworks that I have been creating, I could put some of that on the apron.
Definitely.
I'll be very proud to walk into a lodge and have an apron that looks like one of my paintings.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, man.
So I thought, wow, that would be cool. It all started with that whole thought. Oh, it would be so cool if blank.
Right.
So,
well, it's one of those things, I think, is the Masonic emblem of the beehive comes to mind. Industry, right? We're always busy bees thinking about new solutions, new things to do. So
definitely.
I wanted to kind of go back a little bit, and you talked about your paintings being inspirational, and that kind of leads or transitions right into your podcast. Again, guys listening, Juan is the host of The Winding Stairs, which is an excellent Masonic podcast.
Thank you.
When people ask me about it, well, they say, well, I listen to your show, Robert. It's great or whatever, or I don't like it, maybe. But
how dare they? Block trolls.
But when they talk about it, then they say, what's the Winding Stairs? I see that out there too, and I said, well, you got to listen to it. They said, well, is it just like yours? I said, no, it's actually nothing like my show. It's Juan has his own style, his own show, his own premise. If you guys don't know, it's a very inspirational, like problem-solving, introspection type of show. I don't know quite how. That's how I would describe it, but I hope I kind of hit it. How would you describe?
You.
How would you describe your show?
I would say that The Winding Stairs has the parallels with the lecture in the fellow craft degree, where there are these steps that you can take, and they're specific, and if you familiarize yourself with them, you can have a better quality of life for yourself, and you can actually become a better asset to the people around you and your community, and hopefully to humanity as a whole. So
Sure.
I think that's the premise behind the program, that we can take little steps together, because I try to approach the presentation of every episode as if we're taking this journey together, because I am not perfect.
Right.
I'm far from it, and I'm sure that every single person listening to this is not perfect either, and is far from it. So I'm sure that the brothers, listening, share some of the assets that I have, and some share some of the flaws that I have. So the idea is that in my own personal studies, because that's exactly what I'm doing through The Winding Stairs, I sit down with a problem that I might have, an idea that I think needs to be explored or developed, and I do that for myself, and then I share it.
One of
And if
the
you go to the earlier episodes, I think the first episode or second is about patience,
yeah.
because it was timely. That's exactly what I needed at that moment. I really needed patience, and I needed it now.
Well,
No,
one of
I
my
needed patience, and I needed to understand, why am I being so impatient right now? So I dug into, and I don't limit the my research to Freemasonry. I, as acknowledged in the fellowcraft, there are these liberal arts and sciences that have significant value. So I'll go into even more modern branches of science, like psychology, or you name it. Any kind of modern tool that we can use to understand ourselves better and come out better at the end.
one
And
of
then I
the
share it.
episodes. I'm sorry. One of the episodes that you came up with. I want to say it was 2 episodes ago. Was about basically weathering the storm, and you're complete the program start to finish with that one. You had the anagram with it and everything. Was just it hit home right away. It
Great.
was great, man.
Thank you. Thank you. And I like I said, I do most of these things for myself. And it's important that we have these tools at our disposal so that whenever we need them, they're right there and we can use them. And the funny thing is that I listen to my own program,
Right.
because considering that these some of the things that I discuss in the program are things that I'm still working with. Let's say a month from now, I might start doing the same things that I wasn't doing right before. For example, on the patience episode, some of the things that I uncovered in my investigation before the show were that the the quality of the food that I was eating, my lack of sleep, the reason that I wasn't really dividing my time appropriately, those are things that might follow me for the rest of my life. Those are things that if I don't keep them in check, I'll revert and I'll start eating some, you know, less quality food, and I'll start sleeping less, and I'll see my patience uh, decrease. So
Yeah.
listening back to the program reminds me of the investigation I already did, and it's all laid out there for me. So I have this own reminder for myself. Listen,
Well,
buddy, this is what you need to pay attention to.
right. Well, it's funny. We have so many people out there will say, I'm sure you get these too, where thanks so much for, what you are doing, and thanks so much for coming up with creative solutions to things. And you almost have to say to them, well, when people say you get out of masonry what you put into it,
Uh huh.
and it really does kind of come full circle, because you might be talking about patience, but in the same respect, you're causing yourself to learn about patience. So
Hmm.
like you said, you're doing it for yourself too. And it's just a really interesting concept to me that what we are giving to other people, we are taking the same lesson.
Oh, most
So
definitely.
it's like we're breaking bread, we're sharing the knowledge together.
Most definitely. And the power behind being able to share what you learn with people, because one thing is for you to read something quietly. You sit, let's say you're sitting in bed, you read through something and you have this epiphany. It's like, oh my God, yeah, of course, that's how this works. You
Right.
go to sleep, wake up, a week goes by, you don't even remember that you read that, and it's a vague memory. But when you actually read about it, and then the following day, you teach your wife, or you tell your kids about it, then it's further cemented in your mind. The neural connections between that information and other things that it's a lot more solid, because now not only did you read it, but you also spoke it. And if you also write it, here are three different channels by which you are further cementing that knowledge into your own brain. So the benefits are exponential.
Yeah, the benefits to doing the research for the researcher, and I guess I don't want to sound selfish, but I feel like sometimes I'm getting more out of it than maybe I'm giving to people.
Could
but
be.
but who
it,
knows?
it could be. You give them a filtered version of everything you found.
Right, it's
Like
true.
for us to put an episode together, we have to read a lot, and we have to maybe speak with a lot of people and then condense that into a 30-minute format. We're cutting a lot out.
Yeah, it really comes down to what do I condense, what do I cut out. Maybe you're not. You have this constant battle whether you're cutting the right thing or you're leaving the right things in.
Yes.
So one thing I wanted to ask you about is when I started podcasting, I had difficulties, not with like technical difficulties, but I had difficulties that had the potential to start a big problem where there were brothers who maybe thought I shouldn't be doing a Masonic podcast, some things like that. And ultimately, the Grand Master of the state of Illinois said it was fine and he rather enjoyed it.
Good.
Did you have any issues like that, or have you?
I have had a lot of conversations about it. I and I've received some communications, nothing official, like nobody from Grand Lodge or anything near that. But some people have a concern, and there might be a resistance to change and the use of technology. And there's also the discrepancy between what is actually secret communication and what is actually open for discussion.
Right. I mean, many of the things that you're talking about on your show involve no secrets. It's just, this is a virtue of Freemason. Let's talk about it. And
Exactly.
let's find a remedy to why maybe you have a difficulty with this.
Yes, and that in a way was, let's say, strategic.
Right.
I've always been a person that I'm interested in self-improvement, and not just how it applies to my life, but how can I help other people apply that to their life. So I didn't want to jeopardize the value of what I was putting out with making it too close to being censored.
Sure. Yeah, I've had to censor some papers I've read because the paper's content was amazing, but there were some things in there that maybe I thought, I'm pretty liberal, about the Masonic knowledge because it's everything's already out there. But same thing, I don't want to create waves. So there are some things that I censor also. It's just inevitable.
And there's a difference between taking the safe road and being prudent,
Right.
Which is another virtue that we need to work with. And of course we can talk about the things that recently happened in Florida, certain rulings that happened. I have direct access to that. But if my intention is actually to help the listener become a better man and a Mason, for me to just criticize a ruling or perhaps start fanning some fires, I'm not in the business of sensationalizing.
Right.
this.
Yeah. I had this same thing. I've had some letters. People say, "Hey, do you want to bring up what happened in, Arkansas, or do you want to, or, in Florida, or in Illinois even?" No, I don't. I have no reason to make waves in anybody else's Grand Lodge.
Yeah. And when we meet, well, let's talk about it. I mean, it's open for us to listen, but the format that we've chosen to disseminate this information, it's very open. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that listen to our program that are not Masons. My experience starting up when I submitted my petition, I instantly went out and I started searching. I want to see, is there a Masonic podcast? Fortunately, Brother Eric Diamond, he had a very excellent podcast, and I listened to all of it, and it was important to me. Listening to him express himself about the craft, that was important to me. To hear the Setting Mall and listening to the other podcasts that were available, a few years ago.
There was several that were out there. There was Masonic Central. There was the Digital Freemason with Scott Blaskin, and that was the one that got me into podcasting. Eric Diamond, I never got to listen to it until I went down to my Scottish Rite Valley, and they said, "Have you heard Brother Eric Diamond's show?" And I said, "No, I hadn't." And I listened to it. Fantastic show. Was bummed out, when he took a little hiatus. Now he's back, so that's great.
Yeah.
the only Masonic podcast. I mean, you and I have created intro, outro music, but not on the scale Eric Diamond did. He has a show tune.
Yeah.
And people always laugh. I talked to Bill Hosler, who's one of the Midnight Freemason contributors, and he's self-admitted he gets that show, the song from the show, stuck in his head.
Yeah. And the thing is that there is information that people can access, and that just leads me to another thing that I really have to talk about. We hear that comment that, oh, our secrets are out there.
Right.
Well, it is our responsibility to, whether they're out there or not, it's not to us to confirm them whenever anybody brings them up. Or we have to be super careful, because it would be almost as validating. Like if someone were to approach us and say, oh, well, I searched Google for this phrase and I found this.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good. That's it.
I'm
We gotta
glad.
dismiss
I'm
it.
glad you've done research. I will neither confirm nor deny anything you have just said.
Yeah. Yeah, we really don't have to engage in it, because it's sad. I mean, I know I was watching a documentary. I think it was Discover Your History, and I saw a word written on the screen, and I could not believe it.
Oh, right.
And I was like, oh my God, how is that impossible? But then I quickly recognized, well, of course I didn't divulge that. My responsibility now is not to confirm whether that is real or not. I'm not even going to acknowledge its existence, because I really,
Right.
you know.
Well, it brings up another point, which is, to me, I feel kind of, I guess I get a little bit mad when they show some things on the History Channel or Discovery or whatever it's going to be. But I always have to remind myself that you can read all you want.
Exactly.
But you're not going to know until you make the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And people will be cheating themselves. Yeah, they might be proud. Oh, well, I cracked this code. Well, good for you. You
Right.
cheated yourself out of
You've
a great
cheated yourself.
experience.
Absolutely. I was gonna ask you quickly. After doing a podcast, it kind of becomes natural thing to do is to do some public speaking, and I know you're going to be doing some speaking engagements very soon this year. Would you care to share some of the dates and places you might be going?
Sure. On February the 4th, I will be in Columbia Lodge number 7 in Columbus, Georgia. And some of the other dates are not confirmed yet.
Okay.
I'll probably have to dig to find you some specifics. I will be in St. Cloud Lodge, is here in Central Florida. I would be at the Shrine, Bahia Shrine. This is going to be March 8th. I'll have all those dates on the Winding Stairs.
Cool. I was going to ask if you were going to have like an engagements page where the listeners can go if you want to see Juan do some public speaking. He's really good. If you didn't know he's really good, I mean, the show Winding Stairs is very successful, and I think they just translate naturally to what he does. So
Thank you. I really enjoy it. It's one of the things that I have always wanted to do, and it has been for the past couple of years. It has been happening a lot more. Of course, in the past, it used to be related only to my art. So I would go to different schools and colleges and talk about either the business of art or talk about the different ways of expressing yourself with art. But now, of course, since I have this forum in which I share Masonic information or Masonic education, then now more opportunities are opening up for me to speak about the craft, and I really, really enjoy it.
very cool, man. I know when I can get a chance, I'm gonna have to come out just to meet you and hang out, and we'll go grab a beer or something.
Most definitely. I look forward to it. Well, I did want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak to your audience about all these different topics, and as a way of showing my appreciation to you and to the listeners, I have some nice things to give out. I'm not going to give you all the details of what I'm giving out, but I'm going to choose two brothers, and they're going to receive a nice package in the mail from me. All they need to do is visit thewindingstairs.com/WCY. And right there, I'm going to have a question. All I need is for them to enter their comments in the comment field, and I'll pick two brothers, and then later on I'll private message them and get their address and send them a nice gift over the mail.
Very cool, very cool. So I got to thank Brother Juan for hanging out with us today, spending some time. He's a very busy artist. He has children. He works from home in the studio. Very busy guy. So I got to thank you for your time. And everybody out there, you can follow Brother Sepulveda on Twitter at WindingStairs33. He's on Facebook at Masonic Fundraiser, and there's also the page for the Winding Stairs. His show is called The Winding Stairs, and it's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher Smart Radio. You can listen to it right on the website, windingstairs.com. In fact, when you're on iTunes, if you type in Masonic in the search query when you're in the store, he's the first podcast that comes up now. He beats out, well, among brothers, we don't really have competition, I guess, but you beat out The Life Masonic, which is a pretty big deal. So if you type that in, he'll come right up. So go find it, download it, and give him an awesome rating. And again, if you go to windingstairs.com/WCY, Brother Juan's going to have a question up there. If you answer the question, he's going to pick two guys who answered the question, private message you, and he's going to send you something really awesome. So, brother, I can't thank you enough for being on the program.
Oh, the pleasure was mine. Thank you very much, Robert.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon. All right. I hope you guys really enjoyed that interview. I was going to split it up into 2 episodes, but I just didn't want to have to do that. So anyway, please check out Brother Juan's store, freemasonryart.com, and use the promo code WCY for 10% off. And it also supports this show when you do that. So check out the website he's putting together just for you guys, the listeners of this show. And remember, the link to that will be in the show notes. So please go by, visit, and you're going to get something really cool. So that's it for this week. Please remember to find us on Facebook and follow on Twitter. Check out the Midnight Freemasons, the Winding Stairs podcast, the Far From Centered podcast, Fraternal Ties, PB&J Water, and all the rest of the cool Masonic businesses that we feature on www.wcypodcast.com. Don't forget about the Masonic Roundtable. Anyway, I will talk to you guys all next week. Stay on the level. For Whence came you? I'm Robert Johnson.